On the 9th of September in 2016, a 23-year-old woman was reported missing after she failed to show up for her shift at work. 4 days later, her car was found in a Home Depot parking lot, and after searching the surrounding area, police were eventually led to the roof, where they found her deceased body trapped in an air vent. The exact cause of death was quickly listed as accidental. However, the strange circumstances attached to this case, mixed with an extreme lack of information, point towards a much bleaker reality. So, was this a simple case of a woman struggling with substance abuse? Or was there perhaps more to the story? This is the controversial case of Elizabeth Hock. Elizabeth Joy Hock was born on the 15th of July in 1993 to parents Annie and Edward Hock. She grew up in a small town in Michigan called Superior Township, where she was a popular student at school. Classmates described her as a very kind, sweet and caring person who always had a smile on her face. After graduating from school, she started working as a bartender at the Steve and Rocky's restaurant, where patrons would later describe her as intelligent, friendly and ambitious. And with this drive to succeed, it was no surprise when Elizabeth announced to her family that she would be pursuing a career in business at the Oakland Community College. Her family were extremely proud of her, and everybody that knew Elizabeth was excited to watch her career progress, given her high intelligence and disciplined work ethic. While studying at college, she even started working part-time at the Birmingham Athletic Club, where she taught both children and adults how to craft items such as jewellery, candles, soaps and lotions. Not much else is known about Elizabeth's background, but it is clear from the testimonies of everybody that knew her that she was an incredible person with a zest for life, which is why her controversial passing on the 8th of September in 2016 came as such a shock to the entire Superior Township community. Now, just quickly before I get into the story, I think it's important to mention that there is very little information about this case anywhere on the internet. So little in fact, that I almost considered not covering the story, as I wasn't sure how I would be able to create an entire video. But once I started researching the case further, I quickly realised that this lack of information was apparent across all news broadcasting sources. And something about the way this woman died just doesn't sit right with me, as I'm sure you'll agree. Also, it seemed strange to me that before the discovery of her body, the missing person case was so heavily covered by news outlets, only for all of them to mysteriously drop the ball when it came to conclusions about her passing. Nevertheless, I wanted to share my findings with you, as well as some of the theories about this case, as I'd like to start a conversation in the comments in the hopes we can find out the truth. But before that, let's get back to the story. On Tuesday the 6th of September, Elizabeth had spent the entire day shopping with her sister Emily, before they finally decided to call it a night and head back to their homes. She later sent her sister a message to let her know she'd returned home safe, but tragically, this would end up being the last time Emily would ever speak to Elizabeth. Concerned by the lack of communication in the following days, Emily eventually spoke to the rest of the family to see if they had heard from Elizabeth, to which they all worryingly said no. Their father, Edward Hock, then took it upon himself to report his daughter as missing, given that nobody had been able to get a hold of her for 3 days. The search quickly began, and her face was plastered all over local news stations, in the hopes that there would be somebody out there with useful information regarding her whereabouts. However, despite the attempts of the Hock family working alongside the Oakland County Sheriff's Department, there was still no sign of Elizabeth in the following days. After 48 hours had passed, the search was escalated and teams were now scouring the entire area of Superior Township, hoping to find the missing woman before it was too late. And then, exactly 1 week after she had last been seen, finally there was a break in the case. On Tuesday the 13th of September, a car was spotted in the parking lot of the Commerce Crossing Shopping Centre on 14 Mile and Haggerty Road. The vehicle matched the description of Elizabeth's car, and so investigators were quick to the scene. Upon arriving, they peered through the driver's side window and noticed a purse on the seat. After clarifying that the registration plate was in fact a match for Elizabeth's car, the on-duty sheriff forced open the car door to inspect the vehicle and found her ID as well as some of her other belongings inside the purse. However, there was still no evidence that pointed the investigators in any particular direction, so at this point it was assumed that Elizabeth had either abandoned the car in the parking lot and disappeared with a friend, or something nefarious had potentially happened. There is little knowledge on how the authorities progressed their investigation. However, it wouldn't be a stretch to assume they likely searched the surrounding area in the hopes they could find anything. I would imagine they spoke to the staff inside the Commerce Crossing shopping centre to see if they could expand their investigation, but again, this is nothing more than an assumption due to the lack of public reporting on this case. But for whatever reason, the discovery of Elizabeth's car didn't seem to provide any new leads, and soon the police were back to square one. That is, until they suddenly received an interesting call from one of the store managers who worked within the shopping mall. On Thursday the 15th of September, a call was received from the manager of PetSmart, which was located directly adjacent to where Elizabeth's car was parked. They claimed that they had discovered a cell phone and a set of keys on top of the water heater in their utility room. Police immediately rushed out to the store to inspect the items to see if they belonged to Elizabeth, and after charging the phone and checking the screensaver, the sheriff asked Emily Hock to verify the phone. Well, after speaking to Emily, it was soon clear that the keys and cell phone did in fact belong to her sister, and investigators quickly scoured the shopping centre, hoping to locate more clues around her whereabouts. The water heater where the items were found was next to a ladder which led to the PetSmart roof, and so two sheriffs climbed up and inspected the roof for any evidence. After initially having no luck, they then ventured towards the other side of the roof, which was located above the Home Depot next door, and they continued their search. But then, a startling discovery was made when an Oakland County sheriff noticed a large blockage in one of the air vents. He called his partner over, and together they shined a torch into the vent to see if they could identify the blockage. And then tragically, this is where they first discovered the lifeless body of Elizabeth Hock. After retrieving her remains from the air vent, the investigators began conducting their autopsy to try to uncover what had happened to the young woman. The first piece of information revealed that Elizabeth had been deceased for about 7 days, concluding that her time of death was likely sometime on Thursday the 8th of September, just 2 days after she went missing. Further inspections soon confirmed her cause of death was accidental asphyxiation from falling into the Home Depot air vent and getting herself stuck. The coroner claimed that her airflow was likely restricted due to the position her body was found in, causing compression on her chest. But although it was now understood how Elizabeth had lost her life, the question still remained: why was she on the roof in the first place? Well, investigators soon had an answer for this too, when the toxicology report came back, illustrating that Elizabeth was under the influence of cannabinoids at the time of sustaining the injury. This would imply that the substances in her system were the cause of her erratic behaviour, leading to her strange decision to climb onto the Home Depot roof. So, given the results of the toxicology report, police made an attempt to put together an explanation for how Elizabeth ended up on the roof that night. According to Oakland County Sheriff Michael Bouchard, it was strongly believed that no one else was involved with the death of Elizabeth appearing to be due to nothing more than a tragic accident. So if no one else was involved, did she really climb onto that roof just because she was high? Well, there is no further explanation available on any news outlets I could find, nor was there any provided by her family. I also tried to find any mention of CCTV footage to help clarify the theory, but again, I was unable to find anything. So unfortunately, I am left to speculate using the information that has been provided by the Oakland County Sheriff's Department. So according to my sources, it would seem Elizabeth was smoking marijuana the day of her accident, and for whatever reason, decided to park up outside the Commerce Crossing shopping centre. At this point, she leaves her vehicle and makes her way to the PetSmart nearby, and eventually stumbles into the utility room, perhaps assuming it was a bathroom. She then places her cell phone and keys onto the water heater before she spots the ladder leading to the PetSmart roof. Curious, she climbs up the ladder, perhaps to see if she could get a good view of the surrounding area, and once up on the roof, she begins to explore. Her exploration then leads her to the other side of the roof, located above the Home Depot next door, and then she notices an air vent. Once again, powered by her curiosity, she peers into the vent and starts to slowly climb down the shaft, hoping to reach the store below. However, while she descends, Elizabeth loses her footing and falls deeper into the vent, getting stuck in the process and finding herself unable to breathe. From the awkward position she lands, the compression on her chest restricts her breathing further and she passes out from a lack of oxygen, eventually leading to her death shortly after. Now, nobody contests the way in which Elizabeth lost her life. However, with her death being so quickly ruled as an accidental asphyxiation, many were shocked and suspicious of this verdict, given the strange nature of her body's discovery. There was little doubt she had died from suffocating, however there was certainly a lot of disbelief that her death was a simple self-inflicted accident. I mean, everybody who knew Elizabeth claimed she was an intelligent, driven woman with high aspirations for her future. So why was she on top of a Home Depot in the middle of the night, with cannabis in her system? Friends and family were unaware of any substance abuse, although they admitted it was possible Elizabeth could have been hiding her usage. Nevertheless, this case was met with several ulterior theories, which would paint a much more controversial picture. So let's say this wasn't a self-inflicted accident. Could another person have been involved? Now, this wouldn't necessarily mean somebody else was at fault for her death, but with her antics that day being so out of character, it would surely make sense if Elizabeth was not alone. Perhaps she was with a secret boyfriend at the time, and after realizing she was stuck, he quickly left the scene. Maybe he had a girlfriend or wife that he didn't want finding out about his affair. But if this was the case, he could have always anonymously called an ambulance to save her rather than just running away like a coward. Plus, CCTV could probably disprove this theory in a heartbeat. But without any evidence at this time, it's impossible to rule out that a secret boyfriend may have been involved. But what if it wasn't a friend of Elizabeth's, but rather a person who wanted her to disappear? Could the culprit have perhaps been a PetSmart employee? One of the major holes in the county sheriff's conclusion was that Elizabeth strangely left her phone and keys on the water heater. Now, it's not uncommon for women to carry their phone and keys when they're wearing clothes without pockets, but unfortunately there is no information on what Elizabeth was wearing when she was found. It could be assumed she was wearing pocketless trousers which required her to put her phone and keys down before attempting to climb the ladder. But a more likely scenario could be that she was forced up there by an employee. I mean, how else did she get access to the ladder? Surely customers should not have direct access to the utility room of a store, unless they have the key or an access code. I guess it's possible the door was left open and Elizabeth took advantage of the situation, but again, these actions would not reflect the woman her family and friends knew. Smoking illegal substances and then breaking onto the roof of a pet store was certainly not normal behaviour for Elizabeth. However, another interesting theory I stumbled across in my research was that Elizabeth could have potentially been trying to escape the utility room after being locked in. Perhaps she snuck into the back room of the PetSmart, but noticing an employee was in there, she hides until they eventually leave. But to her horror, they lock the door behind them, and she ends up trapped in the utility room next to the water heater. In a panic, Elizabeth then climbs the ladder to escape, making the poor decision given her use of marijuana that day, and chooses to ditch her phone and keys. Now, after this occurs, there are two options that could potentially lead to Elizabeth's accident. Firstly, she could have climbed up to the roof, and then after realizing there was no other way down, she made the decision to climb into the Home Depot air vent as a means of escaping. The other option is she may have climbed onto the roof and discovered an exterior ladder to get back down into the parking lot, and then waited until the store had closed and it was dark, at which point she climbs back onto the roof from the same exterior ladder and searches for the PetSmart roof entrance she used earlier that day. However, she struggles to find the ladder, or maybe a lock has been placed on the entrance, and so she is forced to find another way in. She then decides to try the air vent, not knowing it actually belongs to Home Depot, and once she starts to descend, she slips and falls to her death. Now, as I read these theories, I am finding myself questioning the likelihood that any of them are true, and to be honest, some of them sound incredibly far-fetched. However, in my opinion, as far-fetched as they are, I would argue that they are just as unrealistic as the conclusion drawn by the Oakland County Sheriff's Department. It's easy to make a snap judgment based on the lack of evidence, and when substance abuse is involved, cases such as these do tend to be written off as accidents. But until more evidence is released, I would personally like for this case to be reopened for further investigation. It's still possible this story could have just been a simple accident, but the behaviour of Elizabeth that day would be strange of anybody, let alone an intelligent, driven woman who had so much potential. But perhaps there was a mental illness involved. As I mentioned in my previous video about Brooke Naylor, there have certainly been other cases of psychosis causing young women to behave out of character. I will once again use the Elisa Lam story as it's the perfect example of somebody acting irrationally due to a mental illness, which then leads to a tragic, fatal accident. But unlike Elisa Lam, Elizabeth wasn't taking any personal medication that may have led to her strange actions, and marijuana alone wouldn't usually cause such irrational behaviour unless it was paired with a mental illness of some kind. It's possible Elizabeth coincidentally suffered her very first psychotic break after entering the PetSmart, and suddenly panicked and climbed the ladder to escape, and then attempted to hide in the Home Depot air vent to protect herself from the invisible danger. But if this was in fact the case, why are all of these young healthy women suddenly suffering from psychotic breaks leading to their accidental deaths? Has this always been a common occurrence since the dawn of time? Or is there something going on within today's society that's impacting the mental health of young women in America? These are all questions I'd love the answers to, but once again, all of these theories are nothing more than conjecture and speculation, so I do think it would be useful for the Oakland County Sheriff's Department to, at the very least, release more information to the public, so we can put this particular case to bed once and for all. Anyway, with next to no evidence to work with, I think I'll leave this video here before these theories start to get even more implausible. But as always, I do hope you found the story interesting, and if you have any more theories of your own, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out our previous true crime documentary on screen now, where we cover the equally mysterious case of Brooke Naylor.